everybody. Chris Gleason, Arts and Creativity Consultant with the Department of Public Instruction. And we have with us today Marie Douglas, the composer for the Wisconsin Art Celebration Project. Marie, good to have you.
Everybody, I'm so glad to be here, and I was so honored to be called to do this work for this amazing project. So I hope you all enjoy it once you hear it. But yeah, it's been my pleasure. It's been nothing but pleasure to write this out.
Well, we love having you, and I'm a big fan of your work, and you are an emerging voice, already well established, but wow, just, everything I hear that's coming out from you is fabulous. So we're really lucky and fortunate to have you with this project. And tell us a little bit about your own personal journey. How did you end up becoming a composer?
So just ever since I was a kid, a very young kid, as long as I can remember my brain working, uh, I wanted to compose music, be behind the scenes doing music or in front. It didn't matter, but definitely wanted to compose. I think I heard, I have a pretty vivid memory of hearing "Human Nature" by Michael Jackson, and asking, a relative in my closest vicinity, and that was my uncle, who was actually a church musician. Um, I was asking him, what, who is this guy who did this music? I was all emotional, and I was a little girl emotional about this. And he told me, Michael Jackson, and he told me about Michael Jackson, his journey and his, meeting of Quincy Jones and who Quincy Jones was, and and a lot of things are passed down like that. A lot of history and culture within African American culture is passed down by word of mouth, and it was just one of those instances where I was lucky enough to get some knowledge dropped on me. Ever since then, I've been trying to model after Quincy in some kind of way, the best way I could. And so, one of the biggest things my uncle told me, though, he's like, you got to learn how to read music. He's like, I don't know how to read music. So, it's only so much I can do, but you got to learn how to read music. And so, as soon as I was able to, I joined band. That was ninth grade. That was after years of playing basketball and running track and just being an athlete. But I joined band in ninth grade, and I haven't looked back since. Somebody gave me a copy of Finale. One of my best friends, still to this day, gave me a copy of Finale, and I haven't looked back since. I've been writing arrangements and composing on Finale since I was probably about 11th grade.
For you. Yeah. Isn't it amazing how one little thing, one inflection point can really change your trajectory and so on. So
Absolutely.
thank your friend for us as well. See, talk to us a little bit about Yellow Bird. So the theme, of course, is connections and so on. So what in this piece resonates with you with that concept in this theme?
Well, I mean, connections. I mean, just hearing about that from the jump, I wanted to write something that felt like love, that felt like embrace, being embraced. Uh, and then when I got Nick's poem, it was just, you know, it gave me that, and it gave me, so many different vibes, but here, seeing him, explain it, watching you guys' interview, and then we spoke a little bit, and then, reading his words here, he sent us a pretty long email one day, and I thought it was really helpful. Like, that's when, it was like February when he sent it. And so from then on, I've been on about, ruminating about what this was going to be. And so, I was inspired just by the vividness of his poem. But the most vivid thing was just, hearing, the voices, making, connections with one another, letting your voice be heard, and I was just, I was inspired by that, and so I wanted to kind of take a couple of words from his poem. I took uh just a few words and split them up, and just kind of gave them to the kids. The things that I felt were most impactful, that I felt like the kids could take away, was, just always be listening for that sound, that sound of that guiding light, and just so many great messages inside of that poem, just chock filled. So I was inspired by that. The color yellow being in the title, I tried to make it kind of, I think I wrote down on my paper, when I was planning it out, I can show you here. It said yellow sounds or yellow section. Like, it was just so many different things about it that, from sensory things to, just emotional things, just within the poem alone. So I was inspired to give a nice full harmonic sound, like a kind of robust kind of sound for the kids, you know, even
Love
at
that.
such a young age to be, I want them to be able to feel the emotion of the piece.
Yeah. And I think it's really important for, again, students who are watching, every one of these choices, was intentional. And so everything from articulation to the harmonic to the melodies and so on. So can you give another example of like a real intentional choice to make this really come alive?
Oh, sure. The fact that I wanted to make it all one piece. I mean, it was called Connections, as opposed to just kind of making it three separate pieces for the kids, for the different ensembles. I wanted this to be an opportunity to actually make a connection. A lot of time we, as academic students inside of the music realm, we get inside of our one pathway and we go up it and we don't even, we never get a chance to intermingle. And I hope that this will encourage some folks to do some joint things within their, maybe their district or within, their school if they have all three ensembles, and I just love collaboration. So that was a huge, big, and that was a no brainer for me to drop
Is
over.
that a challenge trying to think about balance within, no matter what the organization or school decides to do, is it really incumbent upon you to really try to figure out voicing and texture and so on so that it'll all work?
Absolutely. And when it came to, I would, again, I think we were talking about this right before we turned the recording on, but just about how I had a previous experience with writing this big three ensemble thing. And initially, I overthought it, but this time I was pretty clear on my vision to make sure that there were certain things achieved, like you mentioned, the texture. I wasn't trying so hard to make sure that there was the choral scenario was just so to the fore, but they are an important if you put them all together, this icing of texture on top of that cake of winds and strings, and there's just so many thoughts that I had with that as far as just trying to make sure that it felt good together and apart. If so and so wasn't here today, that you would still be able to play the piece because life happens, and so that everything would still be represented, and especially in a young group, you know, just trying to, as an educator myself, having taught band and been in those scenarios and chorus, and so I was thinking like we want to make this perfect for the educators too.
And I think it's important for young kids to know too, and older children. Um, did you make any mistakes along the way?
Of composing it?
Yeah.
Oh, sure, probably, yeah. Probably the biggest mistake was like, I like to do this. I'm this way, and hopefully nobody's like, well, I'm never commissioning her. But I like want to be a machine as it relates to writing. So as it relates to songwriting and getting things out. So I challenged myself to do this in probably about a week's time from inception of the idea, the literal themes to the publishing all the way down to the engraving portion. So, I always make sure I give myself ample time to make mistakes, but it probably is a mistake that I like to challenge myself and write things really fast. But and it also goes to like my how my inspiration is like can go sometimes. Like I'll just have an idea on a whim and be like, that's it. And I'll want to act upon that idea. So that might be a mistake. And then also initially um having this in another key that wouldn't have been ideal for some youngins, so I did change the key to something a little more, graspable, able to be grasped by a young group. So just learning from timing mistakes and also making sure I have it in something that's able to be played, grasped, and heard, and without too much work on behalf of the director. 'Cause
Yeah.
y'all got lives too.
And that's just part of the creative process to you take a stab at something and then you gotta sometimes rework it and iterate and keep going. So yeah, and talk to us a little bit about how is, how's connection, the concept of connection, how's that played out in your life?
Shoot, oof, that's a loaded one there. I wouldn't be here without the connections that I've made, the connections in art, and not, and I don't mean them in a superficial way. I mean, the relationships, the people I met, the like I said, my one of my best friends to this day that I never would have met if I hadn't been skipping class and got my class schedule changed to band. He would have never gave me finale to write music and empower myself. And that was a gift. That was all I wanted my whole life. I've had ideas inside of my head since I was a little girl about sounds that I want to bring to life. And he gave me that. So that little connection just from being kids was a big deal. You know, uh, I can go on and on about this. So
Well,
many filled connections.
your passion shows up in the notes and it shows up in the music, so it's quite the gift. So thank you for all that you've done. How can folks follow you? How can they find out more about you?
Ooh, okay. So I have a website. There's some stuff on there. Songs. So you can go check that out, www.marieadouglas.com. Uh, there's also my Instagram, which is Marie_music, Marie_Douglas_music, something like that. Dang, I'm gonna have to give you that. And just social media in the typical places you can find me.
Okay. Super. And we'll link all of that to things that we send out. But thank you so much for your time, your passion, all the energy, love you put into this. It's really meaningful. We really appreciate it.
Been my pleasure, truly. I mean, I love doing things for the future kids. And it's still a passion of mine to be an educator, and so this helps me to keep my foot in the classroom, my toe in there in some way. So thank y'all for having me.